This is Counter-Narrative News, bringing you daily news today on Thursday, the 23rd of February 2023. Shamima Begum was a 15-year-old girl who, with two other teenage high school friends, was trafficked and manipulated into joining Daesh, or wrongly named Islamic State, which were part of a wider Syrian civil war conflict, which still goes on today. She could only have done this by the failures of the British authorities and the British government. Her local member of parliament, who was a Labour MP, complained directly to the Home Secretary at the time, who was Theresa May, if one is not mistaken. The British authorities did not respond to this, nor did the British police, and Shamima Begum was part of many thousands who were manipulated and trafficked and recruited into violent death squads. They were actually encouraged, very much so, by the British government and media, who were vested and led the conflicts in Libya in 2011 and closely followed by Syria that same year. Now Shamima Begum is in a refugee camp. She's lost several young children that she's given birth to. She was a 15-year-old who was trafficked, who was manipulated and recruited into a violent gang, who crossed borders through Turkey into Syria like thousands of others. And again, this whole situation points to the issue of collusion, where state authorities are colluding with violent militias and death squads for their own strategic interests. So very much so, the British government and media in the conflicts in Libya and Syria in 2011 were openly encouraging young people to go and pick up weapons in line with their foreign policy at the time, including one young man who came back and he blew up young girls, mostly at the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester. Shamima Begum was stripped of her British nationality in 2019. And now, since she's become very much weaponized by the Tories in their racist, white supremacist culture war, that serves to distract and deflect from their own culpability and growing scandals and oppression and corruption, and trying to deflect it onto the most vulnerable people in society, be it Shamima Begum in a refugee camp being stripped of her citizenship in northern Syria, be it asylum seekers coming here legitimately seeking asylum and application to that on small boats, and so on and so forth. Over 900 people who were recruited into Daesh into Syria have already returned to Britain. So again, this points to the fact that Shamima Begum's case has been very much instrumentalized in a very disgusting manner by the far-right Tory regime here in Britain. Going over to Palestine, the colonial occupation army of Tel Aviv has massacred 10 people on the morning of on Wednesday, the 22nd of February. 10 people have been massacred, including a 14-year-old and a 70-year-old. 102 have been injured, of which 82 have been injured by live ammunition by the occupation army. However, there was very strong resistance in Nablus on all levels by civilians, the young people, every section of society except the small children, and including the armed resistance there of several factions. These violent raids, which are increasing in regularity, frequency and intensity, are all a part of the Tel Aviv white supremacist regime's attempts to try and make successes of their new kind of initiative and spurt forward of their violent colonialism. However, as long as Palestinians exist, they will continue to resist, and they will continue in so doing to scupper the plans of the colonial regime. Going over to Tunisia, President Kais Saied has made some extremely racist comments himself. He said that illegal immigration from Africans, that is south of Tunisia, he says, is turning Tunisia into a purely African country, end of quote, as if turning into an African country was a bad thing. And he continues that this illegal immigration is turning Tunisia into an African country with no affiliation with Arab and Islamic nations. One can deconstruct this in so many ways, on so many angles, but perhaps we'll do a longer commentary on this and a review on this. But across North Africa, we have this internalization of white supremacy and a form of white supremacy in the garbs of Arab chauvinism deposited against the darker skinned people of the southern nations relatively to them in Africa. So Algeria very regularly basically grabs people, kidnaps African migrants from the streets of Algiers and other cities and literally dumps them in the desert and points them to the direction of the village across the border to Niger. We had the violent persecution, which still continues today in people trafficking around the NATO conflict in Libya, whose proxies were very much vested in targeting those with darker skin of African migrants and darker skin Libyans, including the Tawargan community of 40,000 black Libyans, the only black Africans in the entire North African region near Misrata. And then you have the opposition who are making a lot of noise in Tunisia about President Said's racist remarks. However, the majority of this opposition were themselves supportive of the lynchers of black people in Libya as proxies of the NATO project there in 2011. So they don't really have a leg to stand on as well. Same situation of anti-black racism and internalization of white supremacy across Morocco as well. That was Daily News from Counter Narrative News. Please do continue to support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, following us on Twitter on counter_CNN, and we wish you a fantastic day.